This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Keep Bias Out of Payments with Jane Butler. My name is Alana Kazihan, and I'm the host of today's session. I'm a PSP sales manager at PaySafeCard, part of PaySafe Group, and I'm a Goodwill ambassador at EWPN and part of the content team. I'm originally from Kazakhstan, and I'm based in Vienna, Austria. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. So just some quick housekeeping rules. The session is being recorded, so if you have to drop out earlier or you would like to forward this session to anybody else, we will be providing you with a link via email within 24 or 48 hours. And we will be posting the recording of this session on the EWPN YouTube channel. During the fireside chat, participants are in listen-only mode, so I will kindly ask you to put yourself on mute if you're not already, and please turn off your cameras. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the question panel in the top right corner. You will see a little chat box bubble if you check it now. You may send your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. For those of you new to European Women in Payments Network, EWPN is a network for women in fintech, cards and payments, banking and financial services in Europe. Our events focus on bringing women in payments together to learn about issues and trends, network with peers, and celebrate women's achievements from across the payments ecosystem. If you want to learn more about EWPN, please check out the website, www.ewpn.eu. So just moving on to our agenda, we will have today a fireside chat with Jane Butler. This is the outlook for today's agenda, and then we will be followed by the Q&A session. All right, so without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Jane Butler, who is here with us today. Who among many accolades and titles is a Vice Dean of the Faculty of Engineering at University College London. She's also a Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering and most recently Chairperson of Fraud Prevention and Risk Management Solution, Cybertonica. Prior to joining Cybertonica, Jane has spent 30 years in the internet industry, where she helped grow Cisco from a small startup to the global company it is today. During her time based in Silicon Valley, Jane has actively supported several small companies to grow and exit. All this while also running a foundation looking at internet access in parts of the world lacking infrastructure. She's the author of Wireless Networking in the Development World, a book about designing, implementing, and maintaining low-cost wireless networks. That book is now used as a standard text worldwide. Jane has built a career out of breaking glass ceilings in the most male-dominated environments, and now dedicates much of her time to showing others the way, highlighting how vital diversity of thought is when making important decisions about their technology solutions. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Alana. It's a pleasure, great pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So let's start our fireside chat. And let's first of all, as we have structured it, define the problem. And my first question to you is, why is, in your opinion, is that even in 2020, with so many movements geared towards inclusion and promoting diversity, there are just 5% of women represented in the tech leadership positions?
So I think there are multiple aspects to this. I think those selecting leaders are still not thinking about diverse leadership in a way that they should, perhaps. I think secondly, the women who are coming up through their careers need to know that during the times when they are taking a break to have a family or making changes, they are supported and they continue to have the ability to get to a senior level and have the confidence to go forward and apply for senior jobs. And I think the problem is that you've got these two aspects that are meaning that it's a very slow process to change the number of women in leadership positions, but we've made a lot of progress. So on the positive side, if I look back to the early days, which I'm going to talk about in the middle of our talk a little bit, you know, there were no women in engineering, full stop, right? And so, you know, we've come a long way, and we've made a lot of progress in putting that right. But I think there are still some things to be done and things to change to enable women to get into those leadership positions. And I think those around them who are selecting leaders need to recognize the value they will bring in those leadership positions, and perhaps they aren't quite realizing the value yet.
Right. Jane, you've worked with some prestigious institutions like the University College London and the Royal Academy of Engineering.
Yep.
What are some of the initiatives that you have driven in your teams there to promote inclusivity and diversity of thoughts, and what has been the outcome long term?
So I'll give you two examples, one in each institution. So at UCL, we worked very hard to look at inclusion in computer science in particular, which is an area which has struggled traditionally to attract young women. And the reason we looked at it is because we were trying to achieve what's called the Silver Award in Athena Swan. For those of you who don't know, it's used in academia to indicate the ability of academic organizations to recognize the role that women can play. And so we did get to silver.
Sorry, Jane, you were muted for a second there. Apologies, just in the last second.
Oh, right. Yeah. There were three things we looked at. One was how we attract more young girls to study engineering and particularly computer science. And for that one, we said to the schools that if they wanted to send their pupils to our events looking at engineering, they would have to send us an equal number of girls and boys. So that was fairly straightforward. The second area we looked at was there are certain times in women's careers that cause them to leave the workplace. And we specifically looked at those, and particularly around when they were getting married and starting a family. And we put in place some specific bursaries to help them to get back to work when they were ready, to enable them to have proper childcare. So we made sure the nursery and you know, the support was there, and as I say, gave them a bursary as well. And the third thing we looked at, when the students were with us, why were the girls not taking the lead on projects? And so we very specifically made sure that we allowed more girls to take the lead on projects in the lab or wherever they were. And we not only did that, but we supported them in that process throughout the project. So we looked at the behavior of the boys in the team around them, for example, and made sure that, you know, that was all working as well as it could. So those three things we changed, and we saw tremendous benefit from all of them. In the RAE, I'll tell you a story. I used to sit on I don't do it anymore, but I used to sit on a panel where we were awarding enterprise fellowships to young entrepreneurs, and they would get £50,000 to help them to develop, to further develop their company. And I was sitting on a final panel, and we had to see 8 companies. And we sat throughout the day, and 7 of the companies, so right through to the last one, were young men who had created this amazing tech or this amazing software, and very impressive. And then number 8 came in. It was a young lady called Victoria Hamilton, and her father was a builder and a carpenter, and he was having trouble with his arthritis in his knees, and so she'd redesigned knee pads. And she gave such a refreshing view of how to build a small company. She didn't have great expectations of being a billionaire. She knew what size of company she could build and what she could do. She'd got a contract with B&Q to sell her knee pads. She'd done some amazing engineering with that technology, and it was refreshing. And so there you see, somebody coming along who is breaking the mold in terms of what an enterprise fellowship looks like.
Right, and that is memorable, and that sticks out for sure.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah. And what trends do you see now in terms of girls choosing to study, work in technology?
Well, I think actually there's some very positive signs, because I think that what we're seeing now is that technology is underpinning a lot of areas of business, whether it's in the fintech area or it's in agri-tech or law tech, or, technology is absolutely fundamental to the future of businesses. And what we've seen with young women in particular who've come through the education system is that they like to have choice. They don't want to be a propeller head developer necessarily. They want to see how technology can be applied in lots of different areas. And so their primary focus might be in biology or agriculture or the legal business. But they want to understand how technology can advance the state of that business. And that's very much where we're going. And so actually the trends that we're seeing are favoring girls right now. There's another story I have which will kind of highlight it. We worked with a group called Generating Genius, and we took 14 girls at the age of about 15 or 16, so they were just around GCSE age. And we set them up with a project to create art using computer code. And all of these girls were from disadvantaged homes. There were just 14 of them. None of them even knew what computer science was or technology. They'd not touched it in their lives at all. They came to us for 1 week, and they created the most amazing art using computer code, and they'd never touched code before in their lives. And every single one of them, from having not known anything about technology and computer science, said they wanted to study it. So in 1 week, you can take 14 girls and change their view of what career they would like to follow.
Absolutely. I mean, I have my own experience. I started studying in Kazakhstan, studied my school in Kazakhstan, and then went on for part of my studies also to England. And when I arrived in England and I went to school, we had an ICT class and then a design and technology. I was shocked not only what kind of equipment was available, but the fact that girls were allowed to go in and use it and come up with their ideas. So that's definitely, you see this change coming about.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely, no question in my view. And at some time we're going to talk about how I brought the internet to Kazakhstan, your home country.
I cannot wait to hear about that. Yeah. Jane, let's move on to what you have dealt with in your career. And your career has focused on technology in what is very much a male-dominated world, particularly in the early years, but still now sometimes. And how do you find that? And what did you have to adapt at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I had to adapt. But I think everybody, when you're first entering the workplace, has to adapt, right? So I didn't feel it was something odd or strange. Remember, I've never known anything different, right? I've always worked in this area. I've always worked in male-dominated teams. So I think I would find it hard to work in a female-dominated team, probably. I don't know. I've never tried it. So I suppose I've never known, and also remember the other thing is I'm looking out on the world, right? So I'm not the one who notices I'm different. It's everybody else that notices I'm different. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, I didn't. I was young. I was enthusiastic. I was, I had my whole life in front of me when I was just starting. So a bit of adaptation when I went into the workplace was not something that I found unusual. I have faced discrimination throughout my career. And I think when you face a level of discrimination, and I have to say that it's much better now, right? I'm talking about it was much worse when I was much younger. And it was very subtle, so it wasn't obvious sometimes what was going on. And I think you have to make a conscious decision about whether you're going to fight it or whether you're going to walk away. And sometimes you fight it and sometimes you walk away. And I think as long as you can have that balance, it's fine. I think, overall, it hasn't affected me too much, I would say. And now I'm very good at recognizing it. And it really doesn't bother me. I have to say, the other thing that's very much played in my favor is that I have always had a very supportive husband at home, which has been tremendously helpful. And he grew up with a mum who was very career focused, very successful. And so for him, being with a wife who was following her career really didn't affect him at all in a bad way. But I think that the people around you are quite important.
Absolutely. Male figures that are around you that are supportive are very, very important.
Yes.
Now, speaking about you said your younger years, actually, how did you decide to choose this career path?
Probably because my headmistress at the age of 15 told me I shouldn't do it. And as a 15-year-old, you know what it's like, right? You're always going to do the thing you're told you're not supposed to do. But yeah, no, she actually called me into her office and said that it was a very bad idea that I was thinking about studying engineering, and perhaps I should go around the corner and sign up for in the typing pool for the typing class just in case. Actually, she did me a big favor because touch typing when you're an engineer is quite useful.
Right.
But my dad was a huge supporter. So again, there was a male figure in my life who was actually a big supporter, and that made a big difference to me when I was young.
That's great, and I'm sure you have many anecdotes that will really show what it was like for you at the time, so in the beginning of your career.
Yeah. So you're going to laugh at a few of these. So the first thing I would do when I got a new job in a lab or in an engineering institution was try and find a female toilet. There were none, literally none.
Oh.
And so I got to know that if I found the secretarial pool, there was probably a female toilet there. So on my first day, I used to have to trundle around the building finding the nearest female toilet. And it was many years before that changed. In fact, I was on a building site. I was setting up the headquarters of Exxon in the UK, and doing all the cabling and getting all the computers and telephones up and running. And there was only one toilet on site, and I shared it with an awful lot of men. And so I had to announce when I wanted to go to the toilet. And they said, and as I was leaving the site office to go, and they all watched me go across the site, they said, "Oh, take the kettle with you and fill it up and bring it back, and we can have tea when you get back." So there's that. When I first moved it, this didn't last for long, but in my first role after I graduated, I walked into the lab and most of the men had calendars with naked women still above their desks. Most of them laughed with me about the fact they would have to stop swearing because I was there now. So those are the sort of things that I found when I first went into the workplace.
Right. And would you do it again? And what would be the one advice you'd give to those who are choosing the same path as you today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd do it again. It was a brilliant, I had a brilliant time, no question. And I found it very easy to bring up a family at the same time. So I was able to stay at home doing software development on my computer. I had the internet access in the early days. I did hardware design. I even learned to type and breastfeed at the same time. So think about it, it's quite difficult to do that actually, but I managed it. So I'd often work at night, and so it was tough, right? You had to do with less sleep. You had had to work long hours. It was quite stressful. So um, I think these things are tough, but it's important you stay in the workplace. There was a key moment for me that kept me in the workplace, which was kind of interesting, because one thing that happened when I was young is most of the men around me didn't think I would stay very long, because I would get married and then that was it. My career was over, and there weren't the sort of maternity benefits available in those days. And so when I did actually announce I was pregnant with my first child and I was about to leave, I left my job, and no thought of going back. And about a week before my baby was born, I was selling my very treasured sports car, standing on the pavement outside my house, and my neighbor walked up and said, "I've just lost my software developer. Do you think you fancy coming along to help me out?" And I said, "No, no, 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 not at the moment." And he said, "Why not? You can come and do this for me." And that short conversation on the pavement outside my house probably made the difference between me staying in work and following a career and falling by the wayside. So, and you said, what piece of advice would I give? So there's several actually. I think you have to work out who your supporters are in the workplace, and they're, work with them. You have to be confident and optimistic and a can-do type of person, but you have to balance your confidence with humility. And I think most importantly, you have to listen and respond to others. It's important that you don't put yourself first. And when we talk about being a leader, I want to talk a little bit more about not putting yourself first. But I think if you listen and respond positively to others, and you give them answers to what they're asking for, then you will always be valued. And I think finally, just keeping your technical skills absolutely up to date, so that you can always have a good technical argument whenever it comes your way.
Absolutely. Thank you for this. It was interesting to hear about your experiences and the anecdotes especially. Now let's move into the future outlook, and given all this data and knowledge we have gathered now, what can we do to change? So Jane, what are some of the best teams that you see working in tech right now, and what can we learn from them?
So I see some super talented, open and collaborative and inclusive teams, and they are absolutely the best teams, no question. And I think the problem is that not everybody recognizes that. I think those teams are the ones that can move fast, they can take advantage of opportunities, they can work to a common goal together as a team. And they recognize and know how to build products that everybody wants to use, whether it's in fintech or it's in some other area. You have to be able to bring a product to market that is valued by everybody, not valued by one portion of society. And the only way you do that is by involving a wide part of society in the building of those products. And that's not only women, but it's also very diverse teams, beyond just making sure there are enough women in those teams.
Absolutely. And let's turn now to your current role as the chairperson of Cybertonica board. Mm-hmm. How has Cybertonica broken the mold when it comes to its culture of diversity, and what does that show to us as an industry?
Well, I'm super proud of this team because they've been amazing to work with. And the primary reason they've been so amazing is because of their diversity. They've got 46% of women in their London office.
Wow.
And slightly lower in their Moscow office, so they're up to 27%. So overall, it's about 34% of women. They speak over 10 languages in the company. And we're talking of a small company here. We're only talking of a company of about under 50 people right now, right? So they already speak 10 languages in the team, and they have about 11 or 12 nationalities in the team. And only 5 years into their business, and look at what they've achieved in terms of diversity. It's amazing. And to work, when you start working with teams like them, you suddenly realize the power of that level of diversity, right? It gives you reach around the world, because they have people from all sorts of different cultures and societies. It gives you reach into different portions of society because you have people from different parts of society joining that team, and they have links, they have bonds, they have insights and ability to develop products for that company that not many other companies in their area are able to do with that level of diversity.
Right. So is this one of the reasons why you've decided to join Cybertonica?
Yes, although I think I joined before they were so big, right?
Yeah.
But we very much on purpose decided to make it a very diverse team. I met Joshua, the CEO at Ideal London, which is a tech hub that I run. And he somehow twisted my arm to come and help him out with the company. I got to know the team. I liked them a lot. They're tremendously talented. And I think we went on this journey to make and create a very diverse team on purpose. And that's what we've done. And it's a hugely powerful team now.
Right. And you said that you set out to make the team diverse, but
Yes.
how can improving diversity improve the technology that we produce as a sector? And Cybertonica has achieved it recently to help fight fraud better. But can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I think it's what I just said. If you want to create products that are useful to society generally, and in this area, that's what we need, right? There's a lot of fraud out there. And sometimes people undervalue fraud, but it hits the bottom line in a big way for a lot of companies, whether you're in, banking, payments, gaming, particularly now we're in the pandemic, right? And what's everybody doing? They're buying everything online, right? So the level of fraud is probably quite high. And I think people devalue fraud and they don't think that it's important, but actually it is. But if you're going to tackle that type of problem, which is a societal problem, you need to have people from all parts of society to tackle that problem with you. And you need to have people from different countries. You need to have people from different social backgrounds. You certainly need to have women and men, because you need to understand buying patterns. You need to understand where fraud happens, why it happens, and particularly now when you're tackling fraud, and you need to understand behavior, right? So this is not just about the technology. This is about human behavior. And if you have a very diverse team that's tackling fraud by looking at human behavior, which is exactly what Cybertonica is doing, you're going to bring products to market that are going to tackle the problem properly.
Absolutely. And our final question in the Fireside chat, and it's a question that is quite popular also. What would be your advice for a male-dominated team in terms of making it more inclusive? Are there any particular steps they should take?
Open their eyes. Open their eyes. I mean, I think that I do still see people out there. I mean, once I get to know them, I hope that I help to open their eyes. But I think, yeah, absolutely. You know, there's one story from way back that I'll tell you. So I had to go into a major bank when I was quite young. I was out on the front line of Cisco, building a company that was changing the world and bringing the internet into our lives. So tremendously important. And I remember going into this major bank, who will remain nameless, but it's a high street bank. And I was invited to go to the executive team of that bank and give them a presentation on how to run their business on the internet. I walked into the room, and there were probably 12 or 15 people around the table, all males, all in their late 50s and early 60s. I gave my presentation, and most of them were saying, "We'll have to go home and talk about this to our grandchildren." I'm thinking, no, you won't. You'll have to think about this for your business. And after some discussion, I realized actually that I was kind of just beating my head against a brick wall. And it was only when those people were going to retire and the next generation were going to come along that that bank was going to seriously think about using the internet to run its business.
Right.
And that's only just over 20 years ago we're talking now.
Right. I mean, like you said, sometimes you just need to step away and move on and find a new target.
But that was an all-male team, all in at the end of their career, and they had not thought at all about diversity and not thought at all about how the world was changing around them that would affect their business.
Right. Well, thank you, Jane. We are now going to begin answering the questions submitted. Let me just have a look. So as a reminder, you can still submit questions, by the way, through the question panel in the right top corner of your screen. You will see a chat bubble. I'll just give Jane a minute to have a sip of water, and then we'll start with the first question.
Sure.
Our first question actually is from Angela. How do you think women can also understand men in tech roles better?
Sorry, can you say that again? I missed it.
Sorry, how do you think women can also understand men in tech roles better?
Right, got it. So I think that's a very important question, by the way. And I've been a leader of predominantly male teams for many years. And overall, I would say that they always appreciated having a female boss. So I think, you know, if men aren't naturally interacting with women in their daily lives, it's very hard. But I think when they do experience working with women, their eyes are immediately opened. And I used to have several conversations I had with me in my team, the people who were really developing the internet, the senior, you know, people who were developing all the technology of the internet. And they were techies, deep into the technology. And many of them didn't even think about, many of them didn't have a girlfriend. Women didn't play a part in their lives particularly until I came along as their boss. And I had some very frank discussions with them around, you know, what it was going to be like when we were going to be working together. And I think overall what I found was that when they had that experience, they predominantly found it very positive. I was quite compassionate, and I think more compassionate than a male boss would typically be at the time. I recognized early on that if I made them successful, then it would naturally mean that I would be successful. And therefore, you know, it was all about them experiencing what it was like to work with somebody like me. And I think once that happened, their eyes were open and they never looked back. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. The next question is from Terry Smith. She's asking, do you believe that we should start the education equality a lot earlier than high school?
Yes. Yeah, well, the youngest that I've worked with is a young girl of 4. And this young girl was amazing. We ran some projects where we were looking at primary age children and how we could engage them in STEM type activities. And this young girl, she was from a disadvantaged background, so she probably wouldn't have even thought about a STEM subject. And at the age of 4, she designed a walking stick with sensors on it for blind people to be more successful in their outings. And she not only did that, but she stood up in front of 200 people at the awards ceremony when we gave her an award and spoke to them about her project. And she was just 4 years old.
Wow.
And so you can actually involve very young people in exposing them to STEM subjects. Not everybody picks it up, and that's fine. You know, everybody likes to make a choice about the career options ahead of them, but they need to have exposure to the subjects very early on in order to give themselves the chance to make an informed decision.
Right. Just a reminder to all the participants, you can still submit your questions in the chat box. We still have time to answer a few questions. Julia mentioned that your anecdotes earlier on about finding bathrooms for ladies is like in the movie Hidden Figures. I actually also wanted to mention that. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I haven't actually, no.
It's a fantastic movie with, I believe, Octavia Spencer, and it actually the female characters there have to run across from one building to the other just to make it to the ladies.
Yeah, that was my life for quite a few years.
Thank you, Julia, for sending over the link. It's a great movie, great recommendation. Annie is asking, what can men do more to support and encourage women in fintech? And we also have similar question from Sergey, the CTO and co-founder of Cybertonica. What can men do more to support and encourage women in fintech? So that seems like a topic we should discuss in more detail.
Yeah. So I think women need encouragement and support at different times in their career, right? And I think if men recognize and give that encouragement and support, it's very valuable indeed. I'll give you a story of, and it was me. I wasn't a male, obviously not a male boss, but I had a young girl, Portuguese girl in my team when I was a bit younger, and she was phenomenal. She was a phenomenal engineer. And if ever you wanted to insert a product to across Europe, say, I would give it to her, and it would be a number 1 or number 2 in the market within a year. But she was on the road, and she came to me one day and she said, "Look, Jane," she said, "I want to, settle down, start my family. I'm not going to be able to be on the road every week." And so we adapted her career so that she could actually have her family, and she did, and she stayed in the workplace, and she's still in the workplace today, and she had 5 children. And her children are now grown up. One's at Cambridge, one's at UCL, one's about to start at Imperial, and so they're very bright children, and she stayed in the workplace, and she's still in her career today. So I think it's just an example of how somebody like myself, and this could come from a man equally, recognize the needs of a woman at a certain point in their career and actually made sure they had the support they needed. And that was all the difference that kept them in the workplace, right? And that's when women continue to give good value in the workplace, and it's hugely important. And that's just one example. I mean, there are different times in people's career when people need to make shifts in their career, and I think whether you're a man or a woman, you still have to do that, right? And it's important for a male or a female boss to recognize that regardless of gender, and actually transition and help that person to stay in the workplace.
Right. So Sergey mentions that it's creating more or less the same rules of the game for everybody. That everybody,
Absolutely.
what you say, the opportunities are there for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think I'm not too much in favor of making special rules for women at all. I think we have to recognize everybody needs an equal chance, right? But at the same time, recognizing that everybody in the workplace needs to be supported through their transitions in the workplace properly. And so he's right, whether it's a man or a woman going through a transition, being supported to continue their career is hugely important.
Right. So we have the next question from Siobhan. She's the head of HR for a payments business. And most of the exec team that they have currently is a male team. And she's asking, is there anything specific that could help to attract women to apply for the roles, and also, this is to foster, for females to foster career development?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to go on a journey. You can't just expect it to happen without some background effort and some activities and a journey through those activities to make those changes. So I think reaching out to young women in universities, engaging with universities where there are young women who are following a technology degree, right, or an engineering degree, and finding out and engaging with those universities to have access to those women, because that's the access to your young pipeline in your company, right? So if you start recruiting, the young women that are coming out of university with the right education for whatever you want in your business, and then you are actually starting to open up your pipeline as they become more senior for those senior roles. But I don't think you can easily change things. I think you have to go on this journey of filling the pipeline, boosting up the number of women that you're attracting into your business at a young age, right? And then supporting them as they become more senior, and making sure you keep them in the workplace so that they are your future leaders.
Right. So we have another question. How do you think we could possibly close the gender pay gap? I mean, it's not an easy task, but at least some ideas.
Yeah, I think it's a lot better. I mean, I think when I first started, it was probably very bad, but I didn't know about it, right? I mean, when you're just starting out on your career, you're grateful for any salary probably. But so I wasn't aware of the fact there was a pay gap. I'm almost certain there was quite a big pay gap. I think it's closed a lot. And there've been some noticeable kind of exposures of pay inequality over time, and I think those are corrected. I think perhaps it's something you can't really. I think you have to decide where your battles are sometimes. I mean, I've never really worried about the fact I may earn a little bit less than somebody doing an equivalent job. Perhaps I should have worried more, but I've chosen not to worry about it. I've chosen just to focus on what's ahead of me and delivering the best quality of work that I can in the role that I have at that time. And I think that's the best you can do. I don't, you can make some changes and you can address some things, but sometimes things are outside of your control, right? And I think that you have to balance how much you battle these things too. It's good to battle, right? I think if you see tremendous inequality in the workplace somewhere, then you have to address it. And it's important that everybody who recognizes and notices that inequality steps in and steps up to address it. But I think balanced with perhaps an approach which is more like maybe, I'll do this role, I'll create this role can be my platform for my next role, right? And I'll address that as I go along. I won't kind of battle it all the time, if you know what I mean. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think also it's a good time to wrap up our Q&A unless anybody still wants to submit some questions. We have a last one here. So Esther is asking, research shows that over 50% of women in tech leave the organization before the age of 35, mostly because of lack of role models, not feeling recognized, and lack of an inclusive environment. What do you think needs to change this dynamic, Why not use quota to change the norm?
You're right. You're right. It showed, I think I mentioned this earlier in my talk, that when we did the analysis for the Athena Swan Award, that was one of the things that really showed up was, you know, when are women leaving the workplace and why? And we looked very carefully at that, and it was often when in their early 30s, exactly as you say, Esther. When they were thinking about settling down, starting a family, and they didn't feel like they would have the support, or they felt like it was just too much to take on. And, you know, my experience of bringing up a family and continuing to work was very hard, right? It's really tough. It's very stressful. You know, it's long hours. You don't get a break. And so a lot of women say, I'm not prepared to take that on. So it is a danger point for me, exactly at that time. And I think we need to do more to recognize that that is actually a specific danger point for women leaving the workplace. And what we did when we were looking at it was we put in a bursary for women to attract them back to work. And that bursary was enough for them to actually pay for childcare. Because when I was their age, I was earning just enough money to pay for my childcare, pretty much. And luckily, my husband was earning everything else we needed. But, you know, so, you know, if you give some small financial incentive through a bursary, you'll get women to come back in. We did find that. And we also made sure that they had the kind of structure of creation nursery on site that they needed, so that they felt comfortable that, you know, in their new environment of trying to bring up a child or multiple children, they would have structure around them that would mean they could have some aspects of their old life and their old career, as well as, you know, feel their children were being well cared for, and that whole unit, the family unit, was being supported. And I think there's more work to be done there. I don't think we've got the right answers for everybody. And I think it's definitely an area where we need more effort.
Absolutely. So it looks like we have covered all of our questions, Jane. Is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I've very much enjoyed it. I hope some of the messages I've given have been a little bit useful. I'm always happy to talk to people about their particular personal situation, and if I can help, or you know, if anybody's got any further questions, I'm always happy to kind of you know, have a chat about things they're worried about or things they think I might be able to help with.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jane, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. I have put up a slide now where you can see some information how to contact Cybertonica if you're interested in their services, if you would like to contact Jane, also via LinkedIn. You also see the EWPN website where you can learn more about the network. We will be posting, as I mentioned, the recording of this session on our YouTube channels, and you will receive a follow-up email within 48 hours with a link to view this recording as well. It was a fantastic session, how to keep bias out of payments. If you have any other questions, please contact the EWPN content team via email. Our next session will take place on the 20th of November. And the topic is the topic is how to attract diverse talent, insights, and best practices, and it's hosted by SIA Partners. So on behalf of EWPN, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.